Animind, an anime podcast where we nerd out about all things anime and dive deeply into the storytelling art while dissecting the psychological aspects that it speak to. I am your co-host, Danny Ari.
I'm your co-host, Graham Pugh.
And I'm your third co-host, Matthew Basil. And in this episode, we are going to be celebrating the holiday Wolfanoot. Woo! Got my wolf ears, got my howl, and we're ready to talk wolves here today.
You are in character.
Oh, I told you.
But he's got like a whole ears going on.
I didn't put on the paws and tail. I decided to hold off on that. I didn't want to scare you too much. But yeah, I am definitely a huge fan of wolves. So I figured, what better way to celebrate Wolfanoot by doing Wolf's Reign, the anime series. So just a little bit about Wolfanoot in case you're wondering what that is and think I made it up just because I'm crazy about wolves. It is an actual holiday. It comes out in New Zealand. It is celebrated on November 23rd, which is why we're doing this. So a couple days from now, or when this episode was dropped, whenever you're listening to it. Wolfanoot is all about celebrating our pack, human and animal, by helping where we can and making the world a better, kinder place, something that I think goes well for our subject of mental illness and mental health, which we talk about a lot in your series. It can be celebrated by sharing a meal with loved ones, hiding small gifts around your home, eating a cake or other food item decorated like the moon. But people are encouraged to celebrate however feels right to them, as long as the expression of kindness to humans and animals remains center. You can check out more about the holiday and helping wolves at Wolfanoot website, which is www.wolf.com. But to celebrate here on Animind, we decided to do the anime series Wolf's Reign, which was released in 2003. Unlike most anime series, it wasn't a manga first. It was an anime series originally, and then it was adapted later on into a manga, which supposedly, I haven't read the manga, but it supposedly differs a great deal from the series. But the anime series was the original, and it was written and created by, probably going to butcher her name, so my apologies. I know she has since passed on, but her name was Kiko Nobumoto, and she was also the head writer of Cowboy Bebop.
That makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it, because some of the same voice actors are in it.
Yes, and actually, I guess it was a prostitute in Jupiter Jazz that I believe Jet goes and talks to. Julius was, I think, the character's name. Makes a cameo in episode 11 of Wolf's Reign. So
I didn't get that far.
That's all right.
Just start with that.
Well, let's go. I mean, since I think the series was new for all of us, what did everyone think?
I'm gonna talk last.
I'll start off. Obviously, I loved it because I'm a huge fan of wolves. I thought it was very symbolic of the spirit of the wolf, which I thought was very fitting considering we're doing this Wolfanoot as well, which is all about the spirit of the wolf. And I thought they represented wolves very well. I thought it was a very powerful story, kind of a hero's journey thing, and it was chock full of symbolism. So it was chock full of symbolism. It was chock full of wolves, which was accurately portrayed, and it was an anime. So I was like all about it. I did have some problems, which I talk to a little bit later about the narrative pacing. I thought was a little bit disjointed, but that was really my only complaint.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, kind of the pacing was a little stretched out. For whatever reason, on Crunchyroll, it only shows 26 episodes, although there's 30 overall. When I dug into it a little bit more, for some reason, the last 4 were an OVA for some reason that came out in 2004 instead of 2003. I got to the end, and it feels like there should only be like 1 episode left, and then there was more. It felt like, especially towards the middle, that there was more padding than it needed to be. But I really liked the world where it's not 100% fantasy, but there's elements of sci-fi. There's lasers and tanks. Then there's like fantasy stuff like alchemy and people turning into wolves and stuff like that. It's also kind of post-apocalyptic, and I really dig that kind of meshing of genre tropes. And then the voice acting was really good.
I'm going to do this like I would do a critique for like a writing class, which I've done a billion of. So I was going to say, one of my favorite things about it is that they really did portray like wolves and like packhood and all of that very like well. It was very well done. And I thought it was really cool that certain scenes, like depending on whose point of view you're looking through or whatever, you're going to see these kids as dogs, and then you're going to see them as people, and it kind of goes back and forth. If you hadn't seen the first episode for some reason or missed the part where the girl talks to the boy, you'd be like, are we just seeing them as people, but they're not people? Because there's so many scenes where I'm very confused. But like I liked how they did it the more I watched it. I really enjoyed the sci-fi elements as well. It's funny because this is an older anime, but it's got that sci-fi futuristic, post-apocalyptic, I don't know, it's kind of just a balance that's very like on a fine line of magic and not magic, and it's existing in the same world where like not everybody knows that this was a thing. They're like, oh, did you know that people came from wolves? And this guy's like, what are you talking about? And then there's this like magic book or something. There's a whole bunch going on. Keep in mind, like I said, I didn't get past episode 8 or 9. And here's why. As a writer, it took me 6 or 7 episodes before I finally started becoming interested. I feel like there's a lot of background information on every character, which is cool. But when you're trying to get somebody interested in watching your show, I feel like when you pace it so all over the place, like you're learning all about this character, and then there's this other story, and then all about this character. Oh yeah, and then they were married, and then they weren't married, and then there's just a lot going on with each character that, I don't know, it's just, I'm trying to figure out what the focus is for the first 6 episodes, and who the flower maiden is and why she's important, and then this blonde woman that we don't know, some mystery woman. For some reason people want to hunt down the wolves and we don't really know much about that, and there's a lot of questions I'm left with even 9 episodes in. And for a show that's only 30 episodes, that's kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's paced weird, because some episodes will go and like, oh, it's been 4 days, and then some episodes will be like, this has been the same day for 4 episodes, and I feel like it's hard to, I don't know, get a rhythm, because in episode 6 I was like, okay, I can get into it, and then it slowed down again, and I was like, okay, and then I got bored again. So I don't know. There was just a lot of that, and yeah, I'm sorry, it's not my favorite thing.
Yeah, you mentioned there's a lot of things that don't go answered, or they throw a bunch of information at you and some of it's unclear. I watched the last couple of episodes like today, and it feels like it's not until the second half or like the last third that some of those get answered. I understand if it was just a few, but it feels like a decent amount of the questions that weren't answered I didn't get clarity on until that last little bit. I think there's 2 of the main characters' backstories aren't even really shown until the last 6 or 7 episodes, and even that's still pretty brief.
There's a lot of allusion that they do to some of those characters that you kind of get like, oh, this person was abused, or you can tell by like their demeanors. I can kind of guess probably some of the backstories, even though I haven't seen it, just from what context clues were given, I think.
I get what you're saying, Graham. The characters, you don't know exactly, and that's, I guess, what drew me in, was because it was a very active viewing. I'm like a fan of like Dune and stuff like that. I think, Graham, you think you read that series too. So like, you know, this active viewing where to me, I really enjoyed that they had that kind of ambiguous aspect all the way up until almost the end. Yeah, I could go back and watch it again to some degree, because it was, the characters weren't given till the end, and you're like, oh, okay, that explains why he was acting this way or she was acting this way, and stuff like that. But I do agree with you too that I think they kind of were a little maybe too sparse with it at the beginning. You know, the example that I'm really basically, again, for those of you not familiar with this series, because it is from 2003, and it was on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim, but I don't know, it was one of the bigger ones during its time, so you might have not seen it. But it involves 4 wolves, basically 4 main wolves, who kind of unite as like a makeshift pack at this post-apocalyptic world. And these 4 wolves, Kiba, Sumi, Hiji, and Toba. Am I saying any of those remotely close to what they are?
None of them.
Okay.
Oh god, we got Kiba. Think of Naruto Kiba, which I also got similar vibes from. Kiba, Toboy, which I heard because I heard Doughboy.
That's what I was like hearing, and I was like, that can't possibly be right.
Doughboy. I'm like, what? It's Toboy. Toboy. It's the way they pronounce it.
Okay. Toboy.
Toboy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, either one, it was wrong from what I.
Yeah.
Sume?
Yeah. Kiba, Sume, Hige, and Toboy.
Okay, Sume. Sume was one of the Sume's, and anyway, they come together in the city, and especially Sume is very resistant to joining them. They want to go basically find paradise, which is supposedly wolves are the only ones who can open it. And nobody's quite sure what paradise is, but hey, paradise, it's got to be good, right? Especially when you're living in a post-apocalyptic world. So they go and they try to find paradise together. And Sume seems very, thank you, Danny. Sume seems
No, it's Sume, but I was saying Sume. I love him.
He was your favorite?
He's best boy.
I thought he might be your favorite. Then you would probably really appreciate actually the ending to his arc. Don't you think, Graham? I see Graham, you're shaking the head. Yeah. But he's very resistant to join the pack. I mean, Kiba is kind of also like a loner, like, I can do it myself. I don't, all of you are hiding here as humans. You're disgraceful wolves. But Sume just really is like, I don't want to do it. And he has problems with Kiba and all that. And he kind of goes through, I think, the most dramatic change through the series.
Yeah.
And just in the first 9 episodes, that character growth was tasty. Love it.
In a lot of ways, I think you could make an argument that he is the true alpha of the pack because he is the one who ends up really looking out for them and keeping them together, especially towards the end of the series. Whereas Kiba's kind of so laser focused on this other character, Cheza, and getting to paradise. But Sume, it's not until the very last episode do you realize why he was reacting that way and basically why he's acting the entire way throughout the entire series, which was really kind of a nice way to do it.
It's like the last or second to last episode, yeah.
Yeah, it's at the very, very end.
But I didn't even get that far, and I kind of they kind of give you a hint of that when he's saying like, I don't have a pack, like. So I don't know exactly what happens, but I can just assume, like, much like the Flower Maiden, his people are gone, his family, and that's kind of what she was dealing with. She goes, they all withered and died, and they bonded, I think, through that because they both lost everybody essentially.
Yeah, we won't spoil it, but yeah, there's loss that they share. Yeah, you did pick up on that. Yeah.
I actually didn't think about that, but yeah, they're all kind of have a background that's been isolated.
They all do. Yeah. Actually, it's revealed that all of them have suffered some loss, and that's like I think one of the beautiful things that that's I guess what I was trying to say in a very long-winded way a few minutes ago with the ambiguous kind of ending that came about, because you kind of at the end realize, oh wow, like this is why they all like were hesitant to come together. They all like have this to carry. And it's a beautiful thing that they kind of were able to come together as the pack. It's cheesy, I think, sometimes to say, but it's the journey that really was the paradise in a lot of ways.
Okay, I gave my favorite character. What are your guys' favorite character? And if they're not, if I haven't seen them yet, then it's fine.
Mine has kind of jumped around. Like at first, I thought it would be Hige, and then especially kind of later on, he starts being kind of a jerk.
No, I'm sad.
Like, I mean, jerk's a little strong, I guess, but he's a little too sarcastic. It's okay, dude, you can like let it drop for once. He's always giving Toboe crap. I really like Toboe. At first I was like, oh man, Sume's so cool, but like lighten up, dude. And then like as he develops, I like him a lot more. I think my favorite one overall was Pops, Quint, and Blue.
Yeah, I don't even know who Blue is because all I know is that Blue's a dog that I suspect isn't a dog. That's all I know. Because
well, I mean, we won't do spoilers unless you want spoilers. So we'll just leave it at that.
I keep saying, like, I'm not going to watch this anymore, but, like,
Right.
I will too, because I hate leaving things unfinished.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm with you, Graham. I kind of was against at first, although I did think, Danny, you were going to gravitate towards him from pretty much the get-go. But
what does that mean? What is hold on?
I don't know. They're just the wounded bad boy, like at the heart of gold. I don't know. I just thought that would be.
Boy. But he's not that bad of a boy.
He's not. Right. He's a good boy. Okay.
He is a good boy. He is the goodest boy. In the end. But I'm with you, Graham. Like I was kind of liked him, kind of like the first episode, because we're not. I think it's the first episode or second episode. We're not spoiling anything when he goes to reach out for that kid in his gang. That was kind of when I started like that. He hooked me then, but then he got so grouchy the few episodes after that, and then as he started switching back, I started liking him more. But I don't know. It would be a toss-up between him and Blue, in all honesty. Blue I really liked as well. And I didn't like Quent at the beginning, but when I saw his full arc, I just loved it because I think that he symbolized so much of what we people in real life who kind of get so fixated on the hatred of wolves because they don't understand wolf culture, or they're in conflict with wolf culture, with their livelihood, and they fixate on this hatred and they just see them as demons and nothing will ever change that. And it was
this
just
hatred like consumes them and becomes like they become this hatred personified essentially, and that's all they are at that point.
People just get it in their mindset, and that was Quent for a lot of it. I just thought his arc was really nice the way they did that, and I liked it a lot. But overall, it would probably be Blue would be my top favorite.
Just while we're on the subject of Quent and his arc, where he's so driven and dedicated to a particular goal, and then when that's gone, it's like, well, what do you have? They don't focus too heavily on that kind of thing, but the whole, well, I've dedicated myself to this goal, and well, what happens if I don't have this? What am I? And there's like another character who like questions their identity a lot because they're like, I thought this is how I was, but now that I understand things aren't the way that I thought they were, well, I don't know who I am.
You guys kind of went down a little bit farther of a rabbit hole than I thought we were going to. So I'm going to just kind of go back a little bit. An interesting dynamic was
there's a lot of rabbit holes in this series, though, to be fair. Okay, I could go really, really far down if we really wanted to.
Right. but the couple, I just found that to be like an interesting dynamic throughout all of this. I feel like if there was one storyline, I feel like that was unnecessary. I mean, maybe it makes sense later, but you've got this couple that apparently broke up because she was focusing on work. That's what they kind of alluded to. But she like still cares about him, but she doesn't like to admit it. And they still go to dinner, and she gave him like a cute little kiss. And I'm like, what is happening here? This is so interesting. But she's unnaturally into this story about these wolves. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with her, I wonder? I feel like it's nice to have somebody who hasn't finished the series, because these are the questions I think any watcher would have not finishing it, because there's just a lot going on, which is kind of what I mentioned before. Like you guys were talking about Toei. He's a good boy too. Yeah. He doesn't understand. He's young. He doesn't understand. In that first episode or second episode with the bird, I was just, he's sweet boy. You don't get it, and he's just so innocent, and it broke my heart a little bit because I don't really know his background, but it seems like he wasn't taught by people like or people from his pack or whatever, if he had one or what. He's kind of all out there lost, kind of gets attached really easily. And I found that to be an interesting dynamic that he kind of has throughout the whole series, is that he doesn't want to be abandoned. He's constantly putting himself in danger because he doesn't want to be alone. People do that a lot. And I feel like that was kind of something I wanted to touch on for a second, because it's one of those things that you got to be comfortable being by yourself, or you can put yourself in these unsafe situations because you don't want to be alone, even if it means going to the wrong people or going to somebody you might not necessarily be able to trust. So I don't know. That was just something that I thought about while watching this. And I was like, wow, they did a really good job with attachment, fear, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Tobo, right? Tobo?
Tobo
Tobo?
the hobo. No, Toboy.
Toboy. There you go. Toboy.
It's like Doughboy, but it's
Toboy. There you go. Anyway, yeah, Towboy, thank you. Towboy does symbolize a lot of that attachment and that need to feel part of it. He's kind of again, going back to how accurately they portrayed packs, he's kind of the omega of the pack. And by the omega gets misunderstood a lot. It's supposed to be like the lowest one that everyone hates and gets down on. The omega actually in wolf pack is usually the one that keeps the pack coherent and actually cohesive and together. And they basically instigate play amongst the pack, and they allow the tensions to be poured on and released. And they basically keep the pack harmonious most of the time in a wolf pack. So he kind of is that. He's the linchpin to this group in a lot of ways because he is the one who wants to keep it together. A lot of times he'll say that outright. And he's also, because he's, like you said, Danny, kind of not fully like taught in wolf ways, he is also sometimes the fool as well, which the omega plays the fool a lot of times as well to, again, cause the pack to release stuff and do stuff. For instance, around a carcass, an omega wolf will get chased off the carcass. That's because the wolves need to move around the carcass to get certain organs and certain parts of the carcass, depending on their ranking. And they can't do that because they're in such a feeding frenzy. They can't kind of do that without leaving and then coming back. So he moves them off and on the carcass, the omega, he or she. So I think that's, like I said, a lot of what Towboy, there you go, see? Towboy kind of does there as well. Towboy also shows, in a way, in his wolf form, that wolves don't make very good pets, even though they remind us a lot of dogs and they're, wonderful animals. A lot of times they don't necessarily know how to live in human society because they're from the wild. And wolves especially live the very tough lifestyle. They're obviously on the brink of starvation. They're obviously pack hunters. They live very ritualistically amongst the pack and constantly communicating with one another. So there's a lot of things in human society that can confuse them. And that's, I think, where the bird that you mentioned, which I think is like, you said, second or third episode, or maybe even first, he's trying to get a bird for this human that he likes, and he just doesn't realize his own strength, and he ends up killing the bird. There's some other examples of this that Towboy does later on in the series, but like I said, I won't spoil them because Towboy does make heartbreak. I think I said a heartbreak to you too when I was watching this series a couple times because he is just but he's such a good boy. And as far as the human couple that you meant, which is Cher and Hub's a police officer and Cher's the scientist working on this flower human hybrid that becomes kind of the central point of the story. I don't know, Graham, because I know you watched the whole series. I got kind of, but this is again what I said, you almost had to go all the way to the end to fully kind of understand what was going on. And I do think that's a narrative fallacy in this series. And like I said, the one thing I would have complained is that they kind of made you go all the way to the end to fully get it. And I think that could have maybe been a little bit more sparsed out. But I took the couple as basically kind of symbolic of humanity and basically humanity's not having any hope in the future. We see it all the time, and people talk about, oh, we got to go to Mars because the Earth's just screwed. There's one quote that I really, really love that Kiba does to, I think, Hub, and he says, why? Why do humans always look to the sky? Why do you try so hard to fly when you don't have any wings? We'll run our own legs. Because he's trying to basically, tell him, why do you think you're going to escape here? Face your problems and use what strength you have. So I think that's how I took it. I don't know, Graham, if you took it the same way. Yeah, okay, there you go. So I wasn't too far off.
So since you are the one that brought up quotes, there were some. Ooh, I always love a good quote. Another quote that was really good was, everyone's gonna die. It's a natural part of life. But if life has no purpose, you're dead already. And it's kind of that whole idea, if you're living your life and you're not enjoying it, or you're not doing what you love, or you're not, finding people that you can care about and things that you enjoy, and like, are you really living your life, or are you just waiting to die? So something like that is, and I always thought that was a really powerful, like, ideal. And I've tried to live my life that way, like find the little things, even if it's just animals outside, because if you're not finding the things you enjoy, you're not really living life. And before you know it, 10 years go by. So it's I don't know. It's good to keep your head in the now and the little things, I guess.
There's also a quote Kiba does. I think it's in the first episode where he's talking to Hige. Hige, there you go.
Fiji!
He says to him, "You're lying to yourself just so you can live a miserable life and die a miserable death in the city." And I thought that's so. It's in the context of a different conversation where he's talking about him not taking wolf form, which I want to get into in a moment too. But I thought taking alone that line can be very symbolic, and I don't know if the writers intended it that way. You end up lying to yourself, and if you lie to yourself every day by not being your authentic, true self, by not being honest and saying, hey, you know what, how am I doing today? I'm having a crappy day. Or, hey, I don't really want to do this, even though everybody else is doing it. And you keep going that way day after day, you're essentially might as well die. You're just going to, as he said, you're just going to live a miserable life and die miserably.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Wait till you get to the last, 3 episodes, I would say, Graham. There was just
From what you all have been mentioning in the chat, I'm crying. I'm like, oh, that doesn't bode well for me. I cry because the sky's pretty. I cry for no reason at all.
Yeah, again, no spoilers here. We're going to try to avoid them, but I will warn you, if you are going to watch this series, which, like I said, I do overall recommend, especially if you are a wolf lover like me, I would bring a box of tissues close by for those last 4 or 5, because I've choked up at movies and TV series. I can do that fairly often, but I can't remember the last time a movie or TV series literally made me just start bawling my eyes out and have tears in my eyes. And
it happens at least once a week for me.
Well, so you are definitely going to be, oh my God.
I'm an empath. I cry. I have to tell myself, it's fictional, it's fictional, it's fictional. My roommate laughs at me because I say that out loud and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's in my opinion, a beautiful ending. I mean, I know, Danny, you didn't get there. I don't know, Graham, what you thought, but I mean, I just thought it was artfully done. But it is an emotional powerhouse. Those last 4 or 5. I wanted to say I really liked. Well, actually, 2 things here. We'll start off with the one that I really liked. Danny, you mentioned it, how they go from human to wolf, because in this world, wolves can use basically glamour magic to change themselves into humans. And I love that it was glamour. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a glamour spell is, it meant that basically they look like humans, but all their tangible attributes remain the same. So when they reach out with their hand in human form, it will flip back and you'll suddenly realize they're actually reaching out with their mouths, because wolves use their mouths as humans use their hands.
Like the cage, the bars of the cage.
Right.
He was grabbing his jaw, like the human version of him. He's like, ow.
Yes, exactly. And like it would flash, you would see them in human form, like trying to stretch the bars with their hands, and then it would flash back to their wolf form, and they're trying to stretch it with their mouths. And what I loved is how they kind of went back and forth, because they would groom each other as humans, and then they would fight a robot as a wolf. And it just was great how they contrasted the wolf and the human elements so well, I thought, and kept reminding us that they were really wolves, and then they were like, oh wait, they're humans, and then they quickly remind you they're wolves again. And I just thought the way they did that back and forth was really good, when it could have gone really cheesy. And I don't think they did it cheesily.
As someone who's watched the same type of thing, except more werewolfy, like I've seen really cheesy, really corny, like transformation sequences. I like the way they did it, that it was kind of flawless. One of my favorite scenes, I think, but from all of the episodes, it's not like the biggest, most crazy scene or coolest scene, but it's just Chessa with her hands on this sleeping pack.
Yeah,
and
it's beautiful.
They're just sleeping around her, and she's like sitting peacefully at the base of this tree, and they're all just laying together, and she just seems completely at peace for the first time. And it was just such an impactful scene. I was like, that's a good scene right here. That was one of the first ones I was like, wow, I'm going to put a star next to this and talk about this, because, wow, I felt just the way, there was nothing said, but I felt it, and it was really well done.
I think, speaking to that, there are those moments. And again, this is where I think the pacing just was a little off, because you kind of are trying to get into this world, and it's so dense with what's going on, because they have this woman in a tank, and you don't know why, you don't know what the city is and what the nobles are, and you're trying to get this, oh, okay, these wolves use glamour magic, and okay, they're supposed to be extinct, what's paradise? And I think those moments kind of, as they're trying to set up the world, which is very dense, it does need to be set up, but they miss some of those little moments, and they don't get them until a few episodes in, and they become more common, I think, as the series comes in. It's just like, you got to get through. Graham's shaking his head, so he agrees too. You just got to kind of get through this world and get adjusted to it, and then you get that. And that also brings me to, I think, Graham, you said the animation was really good, and I love the intro theme song, Stray.
Very much early 90s, 80s kind of like music. It reminds me of all the tape cassettes, like the best of the 80s rock music kind of stuff. I'm like, this, I feel like I would have played this in my car, and like the best of, not just that, but the music was very diverse. There was a lot of music that was in like other languages. I couldn't tell what languages, because there were like no subtitles on Crunchyroll.
The person who did the music for this is Yoko Kanno, who did the music for Cowboy Bebop. And in Cowboy Bebop, I know she used a made-up language for a few of the songs. So
yep, okay. That makes a lot of sense now, because I loved the soundtrack for Cowboy Bebop too.
There's so much overlay here, and for those of you who saw either our live episode we did in September or our season 1 finale, we're all huge fans of Cowboy Bebop. And that brings me actually to a question that I had. I was actually discussing this with somebody. Was the early 2000s and late 90s kind of the golden age for anime? And are we seeing a renaissance, so to speak, in anime currently? As a new anime fan.
Yes.
Yes.
I absolutely believe that the best storylines of anime were from the early 2000s, simply because I think one of the problems with all media these days is that it's like pump and dump media. At least that's what I feel like it is, because it's like, let's just get this out so we can produce it. All the Netflix series that get canceled in one season. It's a lot of types of media that are consumed quickly, and there's not a very intense storyline that you're like, I'm going to think about this anime for a long time. I can't even remember what the last 5 animes were that I watched that were made for a streaming service. So like all of the ones that are, I think, on my favorites list are all the ones that were either adapted from manga that were created in the 90s and early 2000s, or something like Cowboy Bebop that actually was an anime back then. And I'm starting to see more recent animes come out that are story rich. Like, gosh, what's one that I'm thinking of right now? I'm pretty sure it's based on video games, Castlevania. I'm seeing there's a lot more types of anime that are very emotionally intense and stuff that's why it takes a year for the next season to come out, or 2 years, because they're not trying to focus on just pumping it out because they're realizing, hey, maybe this isn't working. The last 3 times we tried to like make an anime for a streaming service, it got canceled or nobody watched it because they were just focusing on getting it out. So I do think that there's a renaissance of more story intensive animes, not just filler animes that you watch and you can't remember what they were a year later.
Yeah, and I will give credit to both this and Cowboy Bebop. As we said, there's a lot of overlap here. Both of these, and which is probably why I like them so much, they have... Cowboy Bebop had a lot of standalone. There were a few kind of connecting episodes, as we discussed in the season 1 finale. And this one definitely has an overarching from start to finish. All the episodes are connected. You got to watch them in order. Whereas Cowboy Bebop, you didn't necessarily have to watch them in order. All of them, at least. But both had a self-contained story, which I think is like what you're saying. It wasn't, okay, well, we're trying to get you to binge the next episode, or we're trying to get you to stay for another season. They had a self-contained story that they told, and they told brilliantly, and that was it. There is, I mean, and again, not to spoil anything, but slight spoiler, there is nothing after episode 30 of Wolf's Rain. The story is over. It is done. Comes to a conclusion.
I like that it's something that they're not trying to, much like now, let's create 50 seasons, like 100 manga books that you gotta buy.
Attack on Titan.
One Piece, Bleach, Attack on Titan, oh god. And they just kind of drag it on and on and on to pump more money out of it. And it diminishes the quality and it upsets the fans. And I don't like that. So when there's something that knows what they want to tell and they do it, and then they're done. That is one of the most beautiful things I think any media creator can do, because it shows that that's what I wanted to do. That's it. And I did it. And I'm happy with that.
You're telling the story. You're not letting money drive the story. You're not letting the fans even drive the story.
Yes.
I mean,
which is another issue I have with, especially anime. There's a toxic anime community that thrives on Twitter. You hear artists and creators getting harassed by fans because, oh, I can't believe she gets to be the love interest when we all like blah, 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 and this and that. And they get bullied and they go to conventions and they get harassed. And I've heard some of this toxic community actually change the direction that animes have gone because they were essentially holding them hostage, like, we're not going to watch your show if that's how you're going to write it. And I think that's really messed up. And I don't know, maybe it's just one of the things that creators nowadays have to deal with, which makes me sad.
I see a lot of that on Twitter, I'm afraid, and just on social media in general. And I wanted to add that I'm glad that the creators are like, here's a story we want to tell. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, we're done. We're not just, oh, we're going to keep you hanging in for the next season. And then, oh, that wasn't the last season, actually. Let's just stretch it out. Like
the final season of Attack on Titan.
I was complaining to someone about that the other day where it's like the final season, part 3. And I'm like, that's not the final season, then. Like 36 episodes is not a final season.
Let's not open up the Attack on Titan wound again.
I will forever use them as an example because that is exactly what I mean.
Yes. For those of you who are new listeners or maybe missed it, we did a special live episode right before what was supposed to be the series finale of Attack on Titan, and we were going to do a recap after it aired. And then literally, I think, within 24 hours of us doing that live episode, they dropped the news that, oh no, there's going to be a third final season. So we're all a little bitter here on Attack on Titan. But
just
anyway,
a little bit. So I just don't like being promised a final season and then not getting a final season is all.
Promised the final episode, not getting a final episode. It was a flashback episode. But anyway, let's not open up that wound. Let's stick on Wolf's Rain.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. and you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Two other things real quick I wanted to just touch on before we left is one, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, since again this is the Wolfie Newt episode, I thought wolves were really accurately depicted here, and I really appreciate that because they unfortunately do get a lot of bad press, I guess, in media. They are often the villains. That's starting to change. There's like that Bad Guys series that has the wolf as the lead hero, and a lot of friendly werewolf stuff and wolf friendly stuff that's trying to come out, but they are a lot of times misinterpreted even in the good stuff. And I thought they did a really good job of showing, one, that they don't make good pets, as I said, but also showing their good stuff, their stamina, and how they are pack driven and very social animals. They also had a lot of interesting things which I don't usually see in wolf related media. Like, for instance, they had their fascination with ice. They had the fact that they can live for a long time on the brink of starvation and then gorge themselves on food. I think I mentioned this in the Inuyasha episode. Wolves are only really vulnerable in their throat and their underside, their underbelly. That's why for those of you who have dogs, if you ever seen your dog go on side to greet you, it's a wolf signal. Wolves do that to other pack members to basically throw themselves at the mercy of their pack mate, basically saying, I am showing you, you can kill me right now, but I am accepting that you will not kill me, and wolves will not kill. It's considered a great dishonor in wolf culture if they actually would kill somebody if another wolf is showing them the underbelly. So when the dog shows you the underbelly, it's basically saying, I trust you with my life.
It's like an act of submission, right?
It's an act of submission, but it's an act of trust. I'm basically making myself vulnerable to you. You can kill me because, like I said, their underside is where they're vulnerable. So there's space. That's why cats and dogs sometimes don't get along, because a cat's primary weapon is their claws. So if they go on their side, they're pointing their weapons at you. And so if a dog sees that, they're assuming, the cat's throwing themselves on my mercy. They want me to come and greet them and make peace with them. And the cat's saying, no, get away. I just told you to get away. So I'm going to strike you. And then that's a violation of wolf conduct. So that's one of the reasons why cats and dogs sometimes don't get along. Because there's a lot of scenes where the wolves get injured, but they still move on, they heal. It's when the throat and the underside is damaged that they're really seriously wounded, which I thought was kind of interesting that they did that with as well. I really like that aspect of it, that they showed a lot of those kind of smaller little details. Also the nose, they constantly, wolves use their nose. That's their primary sense. Humans' primary sense is the visual, it's the eyes. But for canines, it's the nose is their primary sense. So, cats too, I believe. So they're constantly through the series saying, oh, well, wait, I got a scent over here. Or, oh, wait, something doesn't smell right here. They're constantly talking about the scent of smell, which I thought was really cool too.
Okay, since you know about wolves, are they like dogs? Are they colorblind?
Dogs just see different shades of colors. I think they have like one less cone, but I'm not sure about that.
I always thought they were like just black, white.
No, it's a misnomer. I forget what they can't see. I think they can't see. I can't remember what they
purple,
can't see.
something on the edge of the spectrum, probably.
I want to say it's either blue or red. They can't see. Maybe it's red. They can't see. I saw it in a book, so that was. I mean, that's why I kind of know, because a book showed what like it would look like to humans.
Yeah, very like a visual learner here.
The colors would be, I'm a visual learner too, so that's why I don't know the terminology or what the colors were. But it kind of looks. Colors look very muted to wolves, and it's kind of like a yellowish kind of gray almost.
Yeah, okay. Because I was like, they talk multiple times about the color of the lunar flowers and stuff, and I was like, wait a second.
That is inaccurate. Right. Although the lunar flower is a white flower, so they would see the white.
Right. That's why I was like, well.
Dogs can't see red and green, apparently.
There you go.
So they're red-green color blind.
So the yellow, that makes sense. So that's why they can see the yellow and the other.
The light of the moon and all that. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that was, I will say, not the inaccuracy to it, because they do sometimes make I think a couple references to colors that they probably would not because they do see colors differently. They're not as vivid with the colors.
But if they
it's more
are
motion.
like, if they can be human-esque, then who knows? Maybe they're different that
way. Maybe.
So that's what's great about the whole idea of fantasy, is that you make your own rules.
Yes. Which brings me to the other point that I wanted to bring up. And I warned you all in the last episode. So here we go. I'm going to keep it short, though. I'm going to be nice. I love the symbolism in this series that they had. There is a lot of symbolism. And like I said, we can go down a lot of rabbit holes with some of the symbolism here if we wanted to, but we're not going to. Like I said, I'll be nice. But I just love the fact that they use colors as a symbol. There's a scene at the end, again, I'm not really spoiling anything, where the moon goes from red to white, which I thought was really poignant at that particular moment in the series. There's obviously flowers. As I said, Cheza becomes a very central character. I won't go too much into her because it kind of spoils some things if you go too much into her. But essentially, she's a hybrid between a flower and a human. Becomes very central. So flowers are very important. Like Danny said, the Luna flower becomes very important. And of course, the wolf mythology. There's real human mythology here. There are ancient writings that say the wolf will lead humankind to paradise, or follow the wolf to freedom, which could be interpreted as paradise. A lot of Native American tribes have stories about wolves. I think it's the Lakota one that I'm thinking of specifically. Maybe some other tribes have it too. You can correct me out there if you know. But I know the Lakota tribe, I think, had the one where the woman looked into the lake and saw the reflection back of her as a wolf, which is directly copied in the series at one point. Also love just how they tied, again, we're talking the spirit of the wolf. The wolf is very integral to the ecosystem. For instance, in Yellowstone, they were reintroduced back in 1995. Yes, the 31 wolves were reintroduced in 1995, and they had tremendous effects on the ecosystem in Yellowstone. They not only brought more animals in there, because all the elk and the deer started moving and avoiding areas where they could easily be trapped, and so these valleys and gorges started springing up overnight, like 5 times their height. The trees grew, and it just became this abundant ecosystem, and that brought in the beavers and the birds, and the beavers started changing the ecosystem, and that brought in more bears, and foxes came in, and more mice, and all these other animals started growing, and the whole ecosystem became vibrant. And the rivers, even the waterways, changed their paths, because with the trees now growing, because they weren't being overgrazed and they weren't being all eaten up, the banks became more secure, and the erosion stopped on the mountainside. So it became this vibrant, lush ecosystem with much, much more diversity, because they introduced the 31 wolves into it and just let the wolves do what came naturally to them. And that's reflected in this series in a lot of ways, because the wolves are, again, it becomes much more evident at the end, but it becomes a story really about letting the ebb and flow of life happen in nature. But we're part of nature, so that's our lives as well. And I found that very resonating for me personally, because part of the ebb and flow of life is death as well, which wolves killed. They're carnivores. There was the killing and the hunting that made all these changes and brought in more life and created a new paradise in Yellowstone. And it was very resonating for me on a personal level, not in a Yellowstone nature level, ecosystem level, but on a personal level, because I do think that happens in individual lives. You sometimes have to let the old die out. I think we've talked about it maybe in some other episodes. And watching the series, especially the last, again, few episodes where this becomes a very prominent theme and is talked about a lot, I look back 10 years ago, and I don't think there's many people that I still associate with now that I associated with 10 years ago. And there's a lot of people in my life, such as my 2 co-stars here, that I did not know 10 years ago that are now larger parts of my life. So this kind of rebirth and allowing the new to come in was really resonating for me, especially at this point in my life where there is a lot of new coming in, because so much had left and there was such an empty void basically to fill.
I feel like as we get older, we let go of these things that are essentially holding us down. If we're thinking like in terms of the show, some characters had a lot of anger and stuff that was holding them back. Some characters were holding on to, I guess, a dream that may or may not exist without really letting in other pieces that might enrich their lives. Sume, for example, he's so narrow-minded about his I don't need anybody, screw friends, I don't need friends, that when these people who kind of care about him come into his life, he's kind of pushing them away. So I feel as we get older, the friendships that we make, instead of them being forced on us from school or clubs and things and work, as we get older, we can decide to keep the things that are meaningful to us and let go of the things that maybe we've outgrown or have outgrown us, so that we can make room for things that fit better our lives and our ideals. So the symbolism of the whole death and rebirth, all of that kind of falls in line with this whole idea that we were on last season too, is the found families and the people you choose because you can choose. That's important. And so, yeah, I dig it. I really appreciate the idea of letting go of things that aren't for us anymore.
There's specifically one part in the series where they talk about the land wasn't always like this, and the land's going to change. It's going to be restored, and how there's those cycles of renewal. Even though there is sacrifice, things will improve and change for the better.
Exactly. And it kind of leads into this one quote, which is my final quote. But the one character says, "The world where you will go hand in hand with the flower maiden has neither perfect happiness nor joy nor life. This is because it also does not contain perfect sadness, nor misery, nor death." It kind of says the world will never be perfect, and there's not perfect happiness because there's not perfect sadness either. There's some sad and there's some happy, and it's all mixed in. And I think that goes hand in hand with kind of going with the ebb and flow of the life that we're given.
Oh, I agree. That's a good wrap up.
All right, so that will do it, I guess, for our discussion on Wolf's Reign and the celebration of Wolf Newt. Woo! Woo! I think Wolf's Reign is worthwhile to check out. There are some narrative problems, but especially if you're a Wolf fan, I think it's going to be really rewarding if you stick with it. And it does at least show very respectfully the spirit of the wolf, how the spirit of the wolf really goes on no matter what, and is all about kindness, loyalty, adhering to the balance of nature. And that's lessons for life as well, as we just discussed. So I wish everybody a happy Wolf and Newt. And if you, again, want to go and celebrate this holiday or look into it some more or donate and help wolves, you can check out the Wolf and Newt website. That is, again, www.wolfenoot.com. So Wolf E and Newt, N-O-O-T. So anyway, that will do it for this episode. Next up is Bella, the 2021 movie. I saw some commercials for this, but I have not seen this movie yet. I don't know if either one of you have seen it.
Came out in the theaters last December, I think. It's directed by Mamoru Hosoda, and he's directed a few movies that some of you might have heard of, like The Boy and the Beast, The Girl Who Left Her Time, Wolf Children.
Wolf Children. Maybe we'll do that for next year's Wolfie Newt celebration.
That's got some material that would be good to cover.
There you go. All right. Well, look forward to that next Wolfie Newt.
But about a girl who lives in Japan, and there's like...
This is Bella, right?
Yeah. There's this digital world that exists, and it's kind of hard to explain. It's like social media, but it's more all-encompassing, I guess. And it's more
is it like Ready Player One?
Kind of. But all these people are connected on there, and this girl's very shy, and she's kind of a lonely kid. But she can sing really well, and one day she goes on there, and she sings, and she gets all this attention. And it's her just trying to kind of do better for herself, her making friends. And she meets some other people in there who she begins to connect and form a relationship with. It's just about growth, mostly.
So no accidental topics about paradise and what that means, the world coming to an end and all that.
Not quite. It's a little...
Until then, if you want to suggest a series or a movie for us to cover or want to add into the conversation, have some wolf facts you want to share with us from this episode that maybe I got wrong or forgot, you can email us at animindpodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's animindpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free. And in the meantime, where can our listeners find you if they just can't wait till the next episode?
I'm Kittens and Caffeine on Twitter and Twitch and Instagram, all that good stuff.
You can find me on Twitter at Mad Shellfish too. I'll post really weird humor or stuff about fighting games or anime or Dark Souls and stuff like that.
You can also find me on Twitter at Matthew A. Basil, and Basil is spelled just like the spice, but with an E on the end. So Matthew, the letter A, and then Basil. And you can follow my writing on Twitter. I am a writer, so I got a bunch of projects going on. I have a mini series that I do on the Mother Victims and Villains podcast. I have a novel coming out on December 15th, so you can keep track of all of that on there. And I also put out fun questions as well. So you listeners out there can also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains, over at Twitter, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. There you can find movie resources, movie reviews, podcasts like the one you're currently listening to. And most importantly, on the victimsandvillains.net website, you can find their mental health resource library. So you can, get help if you are carrying burdens or you need help letting go of the past. Things we talked about tonight that can be very difficult. Hopefully it ends better for you than the post-apocalyptic wasteland. But if you do need help with those things, there is help out there. So check out the mental health resource library on victimsandvillains.net, and you can follow Victims and Villains and all their coverage and things they do to help promote mental health awareness and break the stigma on the social media accounts that they have in their website. That will do it for the Animind crew for this episode. Until next time, keep both your mental health and anime on the mind.